And so we're going to ask some really interesting questions today. And this is, again, a reminder. It's a conversation. It's not a three-point teaching. It's more you sharing your experience, also learning from, we're supposed to be from a kingdom that functions with righteousness. And righteousness doesn't just mean doing right things. It's an intrinsic quality that we receive from our Lord, and it's almost like getting a visa to travel through this world. And what does that mean when it comes to paying our bills and when we can't pay? For those who are not from South Africa, I want to welcome those. We have so many different countries. We've got Nigeria, Kenya, and we have people from Sweden joining in. I really trust you're going to have a good time today listening from the wisdom of our panelists. I'll facilitate this session today. Yesterday, our president of South Africa released a press statement just warning the country of some of the conditions that business is facing right now. He warned that many companies are applying for liquidation and predicted that many more, and he's talking thousands and thousands of companies liquidating right now. Lots of companies not opening up. That means if those companies, your supplier, it means that you're not going to get stock. If it's your customer, it means you're not going to get paid. So what happens when we cannot pay as in our businesses? What are some of the things we need to do? What should our approach be? And so today's talk is about when creditors cry. And for the first time on this panel, we've got Jan du Plessis, who is a good friend and senior advocate who has given me amazing advice. He has saved my life before. He's not only an extremely wise man, but somebody that has years and years experience when it comes to the law. I asked Jan more to speak about his experience, and especially now working from a point of righteousness. So Jan, a warm welcome to today to this panel. We also have Eddie, who runs an accounting practice, who advises his clients. For those you familiar faces on this panel, we've got Jenny in Sweden, a dear colleague who functions from a realm of tremendous wisdom and heart for entrepreneurship and business. And she has stolen time away to come and join us from a very exciting project with entrepreneurs and dealing with creativity when it comes to COVID-19. So Jenny, thanks for taking that time out. And Martin, who is very strategic and brings wisdom to the session, and my colleague and partner Rainier, who not only sits on a number of boards, but has been on the advisory panel, the economic advisory panel to the president, and often meets with officials and hears what's going on in our country and has lots of insight. So for those tuning in, there are some visitors today listening in who carry their own probably add tremendous value. And I would ask them to comment, just like last week. This is not a one-way conversation of panelists speaking to you. You're free to ask questions, you're free to comment, and I've got a screen facing me where I'll read your comments. So panelists, welcome. I'm going to allow you to speak, and I'm going to ask the question straight out. Let's come out batting. What do we do when we cannot pay our creditors? We owe people money. What do we do? How do we approach it? Do we run and hide? Or do we say, like is a typical approach in South Africa, I didn't know. the situation, or just ignore those phone calls? What should our approach be? And Renee, I always get you to go last, so maybe I can get you to go first so that you don't feel I leave you for last. Um, how, what approach should we take? I know you're never in that place where you can't pay people.
Well, I wish I never was there and never will be there. So there are always moments that especially when you're a man of faith and you take big risks, and you then end up in situations where you overextend yourself. And but yeah, thank you, Charlie. I think the important thing is that I want to, I want to start with the scripture, and obviously many of the attendees are believers, and there's a tension that believers who really are serious about walking in the ways of the Lord experience in this area, because the scripture says, "Oh, no man anything but love." And and that creates a tension in itself for many believers, in terms of when they're in a situation like this. But I want to just really today try to put you at ease. It is not, don't beat yourself up when you're in this kind of situation. Is that the most important thing is to, what I've learned is, and last week Kenneth mentioned it actually, he says, be transparent in all your dealings. It is a very important aspect to be transparent with those people that you do owe money to, and that you're not able at this point in time to pay because of whatever happened. And I'd been in those kind of situations a few times, and where I will just simply sit with the supplier and say to them, listen, it wasn't my intention to get into that situation. I think it's very important to get right with yourself in that way. It wasn't intentional that you did it. It was, you were at a place where you knew you could meet the commitments. Obviously, if it was your intention to really stretch the supplier, and not being sure that you will be able to pay the supplier, you need to come right with the Lord in terms of that. It's something between you and the Lord that you need to deal with. But in my situations, never it was a situation of where I was willfully or intentionally entered into a transaction, not knowing that a time will come where I will struggle to make a payment in terms of those commitments. But then circumstances happened, and I ended up in those kind of situations. First thing, call the supplier, make a meeting with them, see them face to face. Very, very important. Don't let it wait until they call you. And so that is just at the start. It is just something very important. You need to get yourself in the right space of mind here. The moment you start walking around with guilt and fear in this matter, and guilt from, but the scripture says I must not owe any man anything, and then you have fear, what will now happen if you tell the guy, if you're going to function from that place, you're already setting yourself 10 steps back, and it will be a difficult conversation. You go in from a place of finding a solution, being transparent. And I found in all cases that we have always received, as we were transparent with our suppliers in that situation, and we were open with them in our communication. I've always found that they were very helpful. The mercy and the grace extended to us over the years. Look, I can keep you busy for many days in terms of what I've seen in terms of that. And that's why today we can do the same to those that owe us money, that are in those kind of situations, as we spoke about last time. It's because we have been through that. But I just want to actually just give an account from the life of Abram. Something that we have lost in terms of our understanding of the scriptures. We always read of Abram, a just, a righteous man, and we never read about Abram owing anyone anything. So we think Abram was never in his life owed anyone in a business transaction anything. But when you study the life of Abram from the rabbinical commentaries, which is the Jewish commentaries on the lives of the patriarchs, and you then start understanding the scriptures from the Hebrew perspective, and certain words that are written there that give us indications of what actually happened in their lives, which we don't read in the English or in the Afrikaans or the normal Swedish translations, or those the modern translations. And there's a profound portion of scripture about Abram in this regard, where it said that, and Abram went into Egypt. It was drought Abram comes. He's led into the promised land. The Lord speaks to him and says to him, "This is the land for you and your children." The next moment there's a drought. That Abram was forced to go to Egypt. So the reality is he's actually struggling. That's why he's going to Egypt. And he goes to Egypt, and we know what happened in Egypt the first time. And then he came out of Egypt. And the scripture says something quite profound. There's a word, there's a sentence, a verse that says, "And Abram went back on the way that he came." And the rabbinical commentaries on this says that went back on the way that he came. As he went to Egypt, he stayed over at inns, what they called inns in those days. But Abram could not pay as he was staying there because he did not have the means to. And that's why when he then received the means, what happened in Egypt as a result of what happened there, he went to visit each one of those inns, because while he stayed there, he said to them, "I will do good when I come back." Because they knew he was a man of God, and that his intention and his commitment is that he will be able to pay. He doesn't have the means necessarily right now, but he was transparent about it. And that was quite interesting insight for me in the life of Abram. We know this amazing man of God, and that helped me with a great understanding in my life, and saying, you know what, the reality is you can go to places where you don't have the means to. You can go to a supplier and say, "Listen, I've done transactions like that, massive transactions where we didn't have the money. I had to go to all the suppliers and say, "Listen, can you help me in this regard? I can't pay you right now, but when that happens, we will be able to pay you." And the incredible thing, I'm talking large sums of money. The incredible thing is that they're all willing to help. And so it is just, I think it is, but don't come from a place of, be bogged down under the scripture. It says, "Oh no man anything," because if you live by that, I'm sorry, you're gonna walk around with a very lots of guilt in your life when you get into that kind of situation. And let the Holy Spirit really guide you in this matter. You know who you are, and if you know you're not a liar, if you know that you're a man of your commitments, people will trust you. People will give you the space to be able to do it. But communicate and be transparent. So Charlie, that's just short from my side.
Thanks so much. Lots of wisdom there. I see the experience. It's a terrible thing to owe people money and then to go and sit in front of them and say, "I cannot pay." It takes a lot of courage and lots of humility. And Jenny spent a number of years in the bank, so I would really love to hear from the banking sector. And she's also working on a project right now with creativity and finding solutions for entrepreneurs and business in this time. Jenny, before we get to the legal stuff, and we can ask Jan maybe to share what you can do when you can't pay. Maybe you want to share with us, firstly, what's the bank's approach when you cannot pay? Um, I, I I don't know what happens when a bank cannot pay their bills. It happened recently in South Africa. I got into trouble. But what what do we do when you cannot pay the bank from a banking as a banker's perspective? What comments do you have? And then please give us some creative solutions to get out of this. Are you with us?
Yeah. Do, do you want me to start or
Yes,
Jan?
yes,
Okay.
please.
Okay. Great. Nice to see all of you, at least your names in the attendee list. Yes, I spent 17 years at a Swedish bank, and it's working at a bank. It's always really sad when people cannot pay, because it's really those situations where you really want to help and do something good and try to solve the client's problems. But then there is the total legal system behind. So we are stuck in a system. But from a bank, at least the Swedish bank's perspective, it's always, and also from a commercial perspective, it's always best to find ways to keep people out of bankruptcy. Because then we always, as a bank, we always know that we will probably lose more than if this business can continue. And but this is a very tricky situation. But if the client can come up with very solid suggestions for continuation to solve the financial problems in probably an extended time compared to the agreed time, then it is much easier to also convince the legal system in the bank to find and to actually meet the needs. But many times we get to know it. So really emphasizing what Renee said, most of the times we get involved too late to be able to create good solutions. So transparency and coming and being part of the process of finding solution is always the best for everybody. But it's very hard to go to the bank and to come with a failure or something that can be seen, and it's about how people view you and admit a mistake or admit something that is not seen as a success. But in the long run, it's always so much better to get people on board who can actually be part of the solution as soon as possible before it gets too deep. And every time it gets worse, the windows are closing. And that's why it's so important to get people on board when there still are different solutions that can be explored. So that, I think that is one of the best things to do, just to get to ask the bank and or other creditors to be there. But of course it depends on the situation. But as a thumb rule, ask people to actually be part of the solution very early on. And of course it depends on what the security of for the loan is. There are a number of versions, but there are also, as an experienced person working at a bank, we usually have seen a lot of different solutions. So, but coming from one perspective where it might be your first time when you end up in this situation, you might not have this perspective of there are a lot of options. So that's why it is this collaboration that is important. And yeah. But coming to these creative solutions for actually finding ways to deal with the situation that has come up, And we are in this situation with 16 companies right now where they are trying to find creative solutions for their survival right now. And Charles, I would just like to share my screen for some minutes. And this can actually be used in any situation where you need to find new solutions for any kind of problem, but being this specific topic that we have today, and try to find how you can in order to be able to pay your creditors, you need to find ways to actually get the money to pay them. So the creativity is about how can you, with the resources that you have and with the opportunities that you have in your hand, how can they be empowered, and how can you get the value? We talked some weeks ago, and I think we mentioned it more or less each time, about the value proposition that you have. And I just came from a discussion where two ladies running a company, and we started to talk about their experience, their abilities, and they were not, okay, but this is things that we just do it. But there are a lot of competences, experiences that are not tapped and conceptualized into something that people would value. And this is just a very an easy exercise to do, to think. But I will just give you some tips on how to work with a creative process.
Great. So this is when we cannot pay our clients and our business is struggling, so we become creative.
Yeah, exactly. In this specific situation, it's about how to actually load. Yeah.
In an honest way.
In an honest way. Yeah.
South Africa, we are very creative.
There are good solutions and not that good solutions.
Yeah. And Jan can help us with quite a few of those creative solutions. So please tell us, Jenny.
Yeah. So it's very quick, but it's a structure that actually helps. So get some people with different competences join you for a creative process. It will take about 1-2 hours, and it's a starting exercise. So you put up your problem there, and each of you, for yourself, you get a piece of paper, post-its or whatever, but each of you, like 30 minutes each, you just brainstorm, tap your own head. What can we possibly do? And do not put any hindrance in there. Don't select, just put them, bad ideas, good ideas, just as long as they can have some kind of input in the solution. And this is when, so, yesterday we did this exercise, and the exercise was very simple. It was about what can you do with an even pair of socks? 20 minutes. And we came up with 54 potential solutions. What to do with 2 uneven socks. But you have the problem, and you just put everything down in how you can find money, what kind of assets do you have, what kind of competences do you have, what can be of worth that you can actually have this extra income. And then when you have done this, you're individually for 20 minutes. Then you go back and everybody puts on some kind of, you join the ideas. And the next step is to see what is realistic, what kind of impact can it have, and what kind of effect does it have. So but you might have another scale. What is important to you? Is it maybe for you, it would be important to have a 1x that it gets fast. It's not a long term. And also the revenue stream, how much it can be. So that might be your scale. And then you put your different papers up there. So post-its are very good to have. So when those who end up in the right upper corner, These are the suggestions that you would go for. And after that, you create, okay, what kind of plan of action can we have for each of the solutions that we have? And in the process, you will probably get, the gut feeling, your intuition will tell you, okay, this might be something that we can conceptualize. But make sure that you put the right criteria on the axis that would actually that would help you to do the prioritization for your specific problem. So yeah, but the power of doing it together. And next time, maybe it's your friend who needs your help to give him or her 2 hours of your brains and help him or her. And I think the more we do this and try to do this as a natural way of solving problems, we will have so many brilliant entrepreneurial ideas. So maybe at the end, you will have 3 different or 4 different business ideas that you can work with or to get it. And this is amazing. People here, they will start tomorrow actually to actually implement their ideas immediately. It might take some time, as long as it takes to get the new web page up. But in a day, you can have everything straight on if you have the right process structure of getting it out. It doesn't take that long. It doesn't need a business plan at this stage at all. The business model canvas that we uploaded, and it's available on Prowess website, will help you a lot to put it up there. So yeah, Charles, I think that
is great. I love graphs, and I love drawings. I love formula. So impact and
effort. Yeah,
it's beautiful way. And for those who are coaches online, what another interesting tool you can use to help your clients through these difficult times to process their thinking. So thank you, Jenny. I love the banking view. Make the bank part of your solution. Ask them for help. So we must give them this creative process.
Yeah, that would be good. Thank you. All comments are very welcome. Please comment in the chat.
Yeah, no, please, yeah, for those attending, please feel free to comment. There is a legal process, and I've been in situations where I've been unable to pay, and I've been with companies who've been unable to pay. And in one of those companies, Jan even represented us, and we saw how God miraculously worked in that situation. Jan, from your experience, we have quite a few business people. I see we even have some business coaches listening in today. And they're helping a number of companies out there. Your mic is muted, so you would need to unmute it, Jan. What advice can you give those attending today? There's some really strong business leaders listening today. We're happy to have you. What advice would you give to them?
This is a tough one. I'm not in the debt collection game. The last time I did that was when I was a young article clerk in 1981 in Johannesburg. But in a long career as an advocate, going through various fields of law, inter alia liquidations, sequestrations, judgments, the execution of judgments, I can reflect back on that and say, yes, there were instances where the creditors got, let's say, beyond 25 cents out of the rand, hardly more in a liquidation, because of the inherent costs and all the role players. You've got the whole court process. You go and see your attorney, it's instructions, he briefs counsel, it's particulars of claim, it's a long legal process. If you eventually get judgment, there might be an appeal. These days it can go all the way to the Constitutional Court. And then you've got the execution process. You know, with a company in liquidation, you've got your liquidator. The sequestrations, obviously, you've got your trustees. And then you've got your sheriff, you know, and it's a whole process, you know, and then you've got public auctions. And we all know that if you really want to bargain, you go to an auction. So if you holistically look at the whole legal process, it's supposed to serve a real purpose. It does sometimes render a good result, but it comes at a tremendous cost, money-wise. And then also as far as relationships are concerned, you know, the moment you go into that court arena and the trial starts running its course, then obviously the time for a solution, a creative solution, is mostly gone with the wind. Now, that whole legal scenario that I just painted has since changed, since 2005, with the National Credit Act and the National Credit Regulator, that basically now regulates all credit agreements, except leases, and in certain instances, in respect of companies, you know, with an annual turnover or a net asset value of more than R1 million, and juristic persons has limited protection under the Act. It's only in respect of small contracts, 15,000 and lower, and medium-sized contracts, which is from 15 to 250,000 rand. So you've got the Consumer Protection Act working hand in hand with the National Credit Act. So even before you sue a debtor, you've got to draw the debtor's attention to the mechanics of sections 129 and 130 of the National Credit Act. So it's a whole process, you know, and these days for debtors, when they sense that they're over-indebted, they can go and see a debt counsellor registered in terms of the Act, and there can be a whole rearrangement and a restructuring, and it goes to court, and they normally have a 60-day period within which to do this. When all processes are virtually stayed from the collection point of view. And it's a whole difficult process, and it's also costly in a sense. I will suggest to anyone that's more interested in finding out how it works, go to their website, the National Credit Regulator's website. It's very informative. The fee structure is there and the way it operates. So that's also a serious impediment for any creditor who wants to pursue collecting its debts. Now, that is a scenario in a perfect world, as perfect as it can get, but now we are dealing with COVID-19. And that has dramatically changed the whole scenery because you've got massive unemployment. You've got the whole tourist industry that's fallen to pieces. You've got unprecedented unemployment. You know, I, for example, recently visited a friend in Waterkloof. Her neighbor behind her is a SAA pilot with a family and 3 children. You can just imagine what his financial situation is like at the moment. And he's one of millions, as far as I'm concerned, in South Africa. So if you want to collect a debt, you've got to be realistic. You've got to look at the debtors, you've got to look at your clients, and you've got to say, okay, what are their present financial means? What are their prospects of earning proper money again to afford them the opportunity to repay the bills? And what are their obligations? I mean, what do they need? You know, if you just take a basic family, a normal household, you need shelter, you need a house. Most families do need a car. You need food, you need clothing. So once you add all those up, I would say very few South Africans at the moment have the means or the prospective means just to service or to satisfy those basic requirements. And most people are over indebted. They lived beyond their means. They projected their financial future on the basis of no COVID-19 intrusion. So at the moment, I see the debt collectors are struggling to get in payments. And the whole credit collection system, as far as I'm concerned, is busy imploding because people just do not have the means. And if they don't have the prospective means, how are they going to have the ability to pay their creditors? So creative solutions like the banking sector is doing in Sweden, fantastic. I've always been a kind of innovative thinker, you know, going beyond the legal boxes, you know, that everything is like shed into. And renewal will happen, and you, Charles, will remember as well, that to find a compromise, to sit down with your debtor or your body of debtors and try and find out what their true position is, whether they are in a position to make you any offer. Because every little bit you get in is better than nothing as far as I'm concerned, because if you enter the legal process, you better be prepared to spend a lot of money, and are you really throwing good money at bad money? So, and we all know the legal process. You know, you can liquidate, you can sequestrate, you get business rescue, you get debt counseling, you get all kinds of protections for debtors, you know, to regulate the relationship between debtors and creditors, because they are inextricably linked, and mostly they've got the intervention of a third party, which is your financial institution, which complicates things even more. So in a world system where debt is being monetized and where interest is being capitalized, are certainly two factors that are exacerbating the present predicament we are dealing with. You know, I've actually meditated on this immensely, and it almost reminds me of the situation in Egypt under Joseph, when he was the prime minister of Pharaoh. And you look at money and the way people literally want to throttle the debtor. That's what they did in Greek and Roman times. They used to grab them by the neck, by the scruff of their toga, and half throttled, draw them to the courthouse, where they get enjailed for not paying their debt. That really happened. If you look at Jesus' teaching in Matthew 18, with the unforgiving servant who was forgiven for owing the master 10,000 talents, he went to his co-servant, grabbed him by the throat, dragged him off to court for 100 denarii. And we all know what happened. Because of his unforgiveness, his unforgiving heart, he was put in jail. So debt collection has always been a very tough game, even more so before 1994, where you could have been enjailed for not paying your debt. Now, that no longer exists. But it is a tough issue. And if you look at what happened in Egypt, what did Joseph do? He collected grain because grain had real value in those troublesome times when they had famine. Money had no value because money only has a value between the debtor and creditor when they determine the value. So what did the Egyptians do when they ran out of food? They went to Joseph and they paid with money because they could do nothing else with money. And then they went, when they had no more money, they traded in their animals. They bartered their animals because they couldn't feed the animals anymore. There was no grain to feed the animals. So Joseph was just collecting in the storehouse because he had foreseen the famine coming, and he knew that food grain was a real monetary value of the future, and he had enough to collect all the riches of the land in that process, you know. And in a sense, I feel that we are heading that way again. If I look at what's happening around me, food security is going to become the biggest issue. And food will be the real value, not money. And it's tragic for me to see, I'm more of a peacemaker these days, but it's tragic for me to see how people are prepared to kill their neighbor for being owed a few bucks. And I can tell you, I've written off more than R1 million in about 10 years of my practice towards people who couldn't pay me. Because I just said to myself, I'm not going to go to court. They're struggling, companies in liquidation, families who can't sustain themselves. I just walked away from it with a forgiving heart. And that's why I sent you, Charles, this morning, this little picture that I drew, which is from Matthew 18:35, with a heart with a hole in, and an arrow going out of the heart with a heart at the end of the arrow that states, forgive your brother from your heart.
Wow.
And that's the peacemaker's heart, you know. So we are in very, very tough times, a very tough environment out there.
Sure. Thanks so much, Jan. That is so much wisdom in that. But yeah,
Charles, I just want to finish off. You know, Noreen, you will remember that thing with the two ladies from Joburg with the educational company and the mess they were in.
Yeah.
And like I said, you know, I'm not a debt collector, but I sat in front of my computer and I think I reached a compromise with how many? About 100 creditors.
Yeah.
Saved the company. It was tough at times. It can be done because you've got to have the human perspective. You've got to be honest. You've got to be trustworthy, and you've got to speak the truth. The truth will always set you free. Incredibly so. That's just the way it is. Don't hide.
Wow. Well, Jan, thank you so much for that wisdom, that honesty, trustworthiness. And I think the trustworthiness comes in when you make a promise to pay even a small bit towards the debt, is to actually honor it. Don't try and save your ego and you make these huge promises and then you default on even honoring that payment. And I see so much of that happening. Guy says, oh, don't worry, I'll pay you next month and I'm going to pay you 80% or 50%. And he knows he's telling a lie. And he calls it faith then. He says, no, I have faith that God is going to provide next month. And we see so much of this happening at the moment. But I'm quite alarmed to see that the maximum you get in a liquidation is 25 cents to a rand. So that's 25% of what? So if you're a debtor, go to your creditors and if you've got 26 cents, offer them 26 cents. It's more than what they're going to get. But the complication of COVID-19 now, it's pushed us all into very difficult situations. There's Eddie from your side. Marius posted, "Don't make debt to pay debt." I think that is the slippery slope that many are on. They're making debt to pay debt. And as a practice now helping many businesses, would you say avoid that? What's the dangers of making debt to pay debt? What advice would you give us? Thank you so much, Jan.
Yeah, thank you, Charles, and thank you all the panelists. It's such wisdom and insight and that's been shared today. So I'm humbled to share one or two things. Charles, to get to your question, to make debt to pay debt, in all earnesty, that is stupidity, to put it bluntly. It's something you cannot do, especially not in the current economic circumstances. And, people think the interest rates are low now. We will see in a year or two where where it will go, and with even more difficult economical circumstances. So to get back to your question, and it was us as a practice also, we advised our clients not to go into debt. Now, being the practice we are, we've got a certain clientele, and you educate, you walk with your customers, and we educated them really not to gear high. If you're not highly geared, if you don't owe a lot of money, you can survive. So it's always, as Renier rightly said, if you've got a big project and you need to get the money and then pay the money out, those things in the end balance, and you can give value. But there's maybe two other things that I can quickly highlight from my side that hasn't been shared yet. The one is, and maybe it's a bit too late now, but it's really, you must build the ark. You must build the ark in the good times. And a proper accountant, auditor, advisor would have told you to put relevant structures in place that can assist you during difficult times, whether it's a trust, whether it's a saving fund, or just, we've got a product, we call it asset and estate shelter. How do we shelter things? You see, because life happens, and even as I sit here today in my personal life, and this is also an encouragement I want to give people today. It can be, you know, you've spoken to creditors, you've had a team, everything, but in the end there is a liquidation, or you can even lose everything yourself. But I always, and I've seen it in my life, where it's a person with integrity that walked the road through and paid what he had to pay and do what he had to do, even if he had to sell his own livelihoods. Grace is involved, and he can stand up again and go. And I believe, as we are in this time, rather, instead of, so to get back to your question, Charles, do you make debt to pay debt? No. You can rather go to the extreme and stand up and start walking again than to extend yourself to too much debt. So that's from my side. It's structure right, see that it's right, and don't go into unnecessary debt. In actual fact, one shouldn't have debt at this stage, if at all possible.
Thank you so much, Eddie. I like the picture of an ark. Can people contact you? You mind if they contact you privately to speak to you about how do they set up those shelters?
Yeah, welcome.
Oh, thank you. So if you need Eddie's details, you're welcome to contact me, and I'll pass it on. He can help you set up those tax shelters and asset shelters. And thank you, Eddie. I know that is a grace that you carry to help with kingdom wealth and unlock entrepreneurship and wealth at various levels. So thank you for doing that in this very difficult time for us. There's some business people listening in, and some company owners right now, and one of the things that they are questions that they're probably having to answer is, what do I do with my staff when I cannot pay my staff? Because technically that is a creditor. They're providing a service to you, and you have to pay them at the end of the month. So what do you do when you cannot pay them? Martin, you've employed many people. Fortunately, you had the checkbook of a city to pay those bills. But what advice would you give to business leaders who are sitting there thinking, how am I going to pay my staff this month? Do I rather retrench them? What strategies could they employ at this time?
Charles, as you know, I always have a samosa handy. I was in a bit of a quandary last weekend. I went to a market on Saturday, and they had samosas for sale, and it was square. And that I said to the guy, "This is not a samosa. A samosa has 3 points, and you've got 4 points. You're messing up my whole academic and practical theory." But nevertheless, I do have a samosa for this as well. I worked for a considerable time for one of the biggest banks in the country. And my role was basically to reconstruct the debt of farmers at that stage in the Northwest. So whenever I was called on to go and see a client, the client was in such deep distress that the bank had an option to give them one more chance or to liquidate. So I found that there are three important components to consider whenever you get into trouble. The first one is, let us say, the C plus S equals R. I don't have a board to write on, but nevertheless, it will be easy. The C stands for cash flow. If there's money coming in and going out of your business, is a key aspect. If there's no cash flow, no money coming into your business, I mean, the chances for survival is very, very slim. I understand a bit of that at this stage. Then the second one is the S, and the S speaks of solvency. Do you have assets, and is your assets greater than your liabilities? If you owe more than what you have, the chances for survival is very slim. Now, those two put together equals R, which is the risk. What is the risk for the creditor? So whenever you approach a creditor, you've got to understand or have an understanding of your cash flow and your solvency so that you can take it to the creditor and say, listen, this is my total position. Now, if you get into serious financial constraints, I would recommend a restructuring of your debt. What that normally entails is to consolidate all your debt into a single package and then find a creditor that is prepared to buy that and then to provide it to you at a favorable interest rate. Now, the downside for that is normally a person is in such deep trouble that they would, it would be such a high risk that your interest rate that will be charged by a financier will be very high. So, but you have to enter into negotiations. You have to have facts. You can't just go in there with a sorry face and say, oh, I can't pay. Why can't you pay? No money. That will not fly. You must be able to give an assurance to the person who you owe money that he will get or she will get their money back at one stage of the other. And in order for you to be able to confidently put your position, then you have to have the facts together. So I want to conclude. The first one is get your cash flow figures right. If there's no cash flow, if you're insolvent, I would rather than plead the 25% case and leave it over to the debt collectors to try and get whatever they can. But if there's hope and you can motivate it from a risk perspective, and the risk is determined by your cash flow and your solvency, and of course, there's one important thing as well. It is your personal credibility, your reputation in the marketplace. Sometimes your solvency can be pathetic, your cash flow can be non-existent, but because of your good name and your reputation as an honorable person, you often get the support from your creditors. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you so much, Martin. So those who have staff to pay, I think help them understand the business, help them understand your cash flow. A lot of staff are sitting now wondering, am I going to get paid? Make them what Jenny proposed, make them part of a creative solution, engage your staff. There's some interesting comments. Petrus says, what about lending to each other without interest? Great. Petrus, can you send me your number? Uh, but I'm going to ask Jan. Jacques posted a question. What happens now with respect to surety ships and COVID-19? Are those surety ships still valid? COVID-19 is certainly companies are calling for force majeure. What can we do, or what is the status now with COVID-19 and these surety ships that some of these companies and people have signed? What can they do?
Well, I'm very hesitant to give definitive legal advice over a forum like this without me having seen the paperwork. Because I don't know how the surety ship is termed, but generally speaking, it should not affect the surety ship because it's an accessory obligation in the event of the principal debtor that owes a debt to the creditor not honoring his or her obligation. So I can't see how it can be affected unless there's some term or stipulation in itself that you will be excused to surety ship in the event of an invisible enemy like COVID-19 entering the arena unexpectedly. Eventuating a scenario where the principal debtor can't pay the creditor. This issue has been raised in insurance claims. I mean, have you been insured against such a risk happening, a medical risk, an unforeseen medical risk? It's quite a conundrum in the legal fraternity in the insurance industry at the moment, because as far as I can see, insurance companies are just repudiating because they cannot afford to start paying out. So they will rather go that route. But in short, generally, it will not affect the veracity and the effectiveness of the surety.
Thanks, Jan. There you got it, Jacques. And if you want Jan to look at your surety ships, please contact him. I think his rate is still 10,000 Rand an hour. And
no, I know I had to triple it because of the adverse financial circumstances. That's a worldly principle. It's less, so I've got to make more.
Well, for those who don't know, Jan is he's feeding so many people right now. He is doing so much humanitarian work. So Jan, you're one of my heroes when I watch what you're doing and the social media stuff. May God truly bless you.
Thank you so much.
Renier, any last words? Our time is run out, but you always give these pearls of wisdom after listening to everyone, and then you throw out these nuggets. You got any nuggets for us today?
Charles, I think it's, I want to respond to Petey's question. I know him as Petey, Petrus Ace on the, I see he's got a very formal name on the attendee list. And he just sent me a WhatsApp after you said, Petey, give me your number. He said, I need to get you to laugh as well. So, but on a serious note on that is that it's something that the Lord has really instructed us over the years to practice. Whenever I lend money to a family member, or whenever I lend money to a brother or a sister in the Lord, I will never charge interest. And I always make sure that it is money that I lend to them, which I can write off. I'm not dependent on that money. So that is something that I've just learned over the years. And this really always helped us tremendously to do that. Whenever we, and Charles and myself, we've invested in a number of businesses over the years, and we don't believe in lending money to people at the interest rate. We rather invest with them and take risk with them. So we participate in the profit return, and instead of lending, because I really believe lending, we know interest rates and inflation is legalized theft. I mean, that is that you can always understand. It's legalized theft, and don't steal from people. So that is a very important thing that we have learned, that the Holy Spirit has taught me personally over the years to walk in, and it has always really helped us tremendously. Secondly, is that in terms of the employee side, one of the things the Lord showed us over the last 6 years in terms of with employees, He said it's very important that you, and we call all the employees in the different companies that I'm in, we call them associates. We don't call them employees. Because the Lord showed us a very important understanding culture to instill with employees, and that is that they are equally responsible for the welfare of the business as what the directors or the management or the owners are. So one of the things we have instilled in that is that we say always to them, first we pay the suppliers, and then we pay the associates, then we pay the management, and then we pay the directors, and we do it in that order. So the reality is that, and we have implemented things where employees have delivered late to a client, which means the client will pay late. We have agreements in place, and I've checked it in the labor law and all of that. We pretty much we are within the labor law framework. We have an agreement with each of the associates that if the client is paying late because you delivered late, then you will also get paid late, whether it's a week late. And I tell you what, we've only had to do it twice, maximum 3 times with someone. And after that, they understood the value that they are delivering. They are part of building this business. And so we share the load. Because what is a team? A team is the acronym. T, we think together. E, we execute together. A, we're accountable one to another. And M, we meet regular to measure our progress. That is the acronym of a team. And if you want to make it an A team, the A stands for all think together, all execute, all are accountable, and all measure and meet together. So those are the very thing. And then just one last thing in terms of when you sit with, when you can't pay the guys, is that be factual. Martin mentioned it, Jenny mentioned it, Jan referred to it, Eddie referred to it. Be factual in your communication. Don't make empty promises. I made that mistake a few times where because you make a promise, there's something that we teach people in Christianity, and it's called faith versus presumption. People, there's a big difference between the two. Is that faith is something that you walk in, but you know God has spoken to you. You have clarity on the matter. This is what God has said to you. And then you can communicate that to the person that you're owing money to. But presumption is when you come and you think that because you have asked God to help you in this regard, He's going to help you. You first need to get clarity. And I had gone through those situations in my own life. I've learned the difference between the two. And now, I mean, there were times when I would sit with someone and they say, when are you going to pay? And I had to say to them, I don't know. They say, but you can't say that to me. I need an answer from you. I said, I don't know. They said, but then give me some guarantees. And I said to them, the guarantee is sitting in front of you. I am the guarantee that you will get paid. They said, but you haven't paid me yet. So how can you be the guarantee? I say, the guarantee is sitting in front of you because I know what we're busy doing will bear the fruit that we will be able to pay you. Maybe a little bit later than what you wanted, but we will pay you. And that has worked for me every time. And it has never failed me because I've learned. And I come before the Lord and I wait before him until I have his word on the matter. And when I have his word on the matter, you can ask my wife, I'm not a very nice person between that time until I receive the word of the Lord on the matter. Because I'm grumpy, and then because the word of the Lord gives me peace as to how do I now engage with those people. Because Martin mentioned about, he said, if your liabilities exceed your assets, stop. Well, I'm an entrepreneur. My liabilities exceed my assets most of the time, but I don't stop. But that's what entrepreneurs do, Martin. Sorry for that, but I know where Martin comes from. And the other thing I want to say to people is that turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash flow is reality.
Yes.
Thank you, Charles.
Amen. Well, there you heard it. Thank you for tuning in today, and for those who will listen to these recordings. A lot of people are benefiting from it. We really appreciate your time, panelists, for investing. This is your investment into so many businesses that have tuned in from different countries. We've got quite a few from Nigeria, from Kenya, and then South Africa and Sweden. So thank you for joining in today. Jan, first time on this panel, thank you for sharing and your wisdom. Martin, Renier, Eddie again, and Jenny. Jenny had to leave a little bit earlier to get back to her class, but a great blessings to you all. And next week, we conclude this Business Beyond Borders series with the spirit of strategy. And how do you develop a strategy that will get through this season? And that's going to be a very interesting talk. We'll invite some people on who have navigated through this season with miraculous results. So we're going to learn from them. But please join us next week, same place at 12:30 on Zoom for our final webinar on Business Beyond Borders.